I'm Jennifer Neeley, instructor and creator of the course we're previewing today. Whether you're a developer, marketer, entrepreneur, or exploring your next career move, I'm so glad you found us because it's an important topic to have your arms around and feel like you have a community of support. Of course, as with Latina Geeks, please tag them on social. If you find anything that you want to ask me about further or that's interesting as we go, you're welcome to tag me. I'm everywhere on social media at Jennifer Neeley, except for TikTok, where I'm Gigi Neeley, because that's what my mom calls me. Please feel free to stay engaged. We want to hear from you, but I want to get through some rather dense material and get you some good information before we end our session today. So with that, why influencer strategy now? We're unpacking how to use influencer strategy as a real growth tool, so business growth. And it really can apply to any organization type. It's really important to think about this in the context of a level head and not about chasing fame, right? It's about measuring impact. We'll dig into the exact tactics creators and brands are using in 2025 to build businesses and shape culture. Whether you're already working with influencers or you're consider building your own brand, I want you to leave today with some actionable insights. So let's go ahead and dive in. Not all followers are equal. Not all size is equal. So we'll explore how to match influencer tiers to your goals, including what the typical budget range is. Next, we'll break down the platforms that matter right now, from TikTok to Reddit, and how each supports different kinds of engagement. We'll also get a mini masterclass in short form content, the signals that algorithms use on the different networks to tell a story, to build trust, and to make a point in under 60 seconds. We'll also look at metrics that actually move the needle, so you're not guessing at ROI. And finally, we'll touch on ethics, really important, often gets overlooked. From FTC rules to audience transparency, we want your campaigns to build trust and not risk, and for you to lead that piece of things. Don't leave it to the influencer to lead you, which can sometimes happen. So these principles apply, of course, whether you're building your own brand, representing a startup, or managing influencer campaigns for clients. Think about them as kind of universal tools. So the influencer spectrum, let's break down the landscape, not just by follower count, but by what it costs to work with each type. You've got nano influencers who may charge from $50 to $250 a post. And of course, it can be a little inside or outside of that range. They are great because they often are very engaged in your niche and they over deliver in engagement and are certainly authentic. So that's the big thing going for nano influencers. And think laterally about this too. Sometimes people don't think about categories of influencers that could be useful to them. I think this is where human creativity that really AI can't replace, at least not right now, can really help. So if you think about different communities that might be tightly aligned, you may not think about people like religious leaders can be a good example. It can be controversial too, but it might be worth the risk if it seems to align really well with your group. But it's also really important to understand that the 1,000 people they're able to mobilize are able to get the vision of what you're doing very quickly. So they have that kind of shorthand with their audience. Micro influencers offer incredible ROI. Their typical rates are 100 to 1,000, depending on the niche. The format can include how long the campaign runs and what format it takes. Mid-tier creators scale up the reach, but so does the price. They go from about 500 to 5,000 per campaign. And usually you get a little bit more content as you go up in price. Macro influencers expect 5,000 to 25,000, especially if you're asking for usage rights or exclusivity. For larger brands, that's going to be more important, but you should really think about that in terms of what kind of IP you might be building with your influencer. It's really important in terms of monetization for the future. So try to be, again, strategically thinking ahead. And then, of course, mega influencers start around 25,000. They can include celebrities. But the bottom line here is influencer marketing can feel like a numbers game, but when you zoom in, the data tells us that micro and nano influencers often outperform mega creators because right now trust is more important than it's ever been. More followers does not equal necessarily better results. Real performance comes from trust, relevance, and audience, that audience alignment. Let's take a look at some case studies. I've put together 3 examples of how niche creators and intentional campaign design can deliver measurable business results even when ROI is difficult to capture. And it really is notoriously difficult to capture in this arena. Because think about it as harnessing what we used to call word of mouth, right? The boomers all talked about word of mouth marketing when they were doing marketing or PR back in the day. So it's still kind of the same idea, but we're using digital tools to harness that. Some digital tools are more sophisticated than others. We know there's a common thread of kind of over-promising and under-delivering sometimes. So we need to have realistic ideas in mind so we can really build a strategy around that. I took a look at long-term organic content cadence, incentivized affiliate partnerships, and then a creator-produced performance ad. So let's dig in, and I did this influencer chart. Going up is actually smaller on that chart. The case studies start with ReTreat Resort. The ROI of Creators was the name of that campaign. And I do want to say as an aside, I'm going to give some context around the numbers that's really important so you don't apply this so directly to your organization. Context is everything, right? None of the results of these examples I'm giving you are independently audited. They're often given as white papers or case studies online, but they are reported online and they are reliable in that sense. The example of ReTreat Resort, the ROI of Creators, is a masterclass in consistency and compounding reach over time. Really clear on what the story is. Instead of relying on one viral moment, this little escape in Alabama where, frankly, a place I probably would never want to go, but now I actually want to see this place. They committed to a year-long residency model. They're a hospitality business, and they had roughly one influencer stay per week, so about 52 weeks, 12 months. Influencers created immersive Instagram content. So think reels, posts, stories, highlighting the amenities, nature, nearby attractions, and obviously the environment that you're in because it's a very unique place to stay. They designed the campaign to encourage referrals among other creators too. So it was kind of self-sustaining. They didn't have to go find every creator they wanted to work with at first. They could kind of see how things performed and let the community kind of drive a little bit, which of course communities love, creating what we call in marketing a network effect that multiplied their reach organically. So the results they reported, revenue and occupancy doubled in the first year. ROI, return on investment, improved from $13 to $28 for every $1 spent. Instagram audience grew by 650% and became their top lead driver. And in hospitality, you can imagine that can really cut down on costs at this moment in time when you think about Expedia and others are taking probably 30 to 40% off the top. Some reels reached over or about 1 million views. Each stay generated about 2 new creator inquiries on average. So again, self-sustaining campaigns so they could continue it even if they wanted. Now, the important context I want to put around this, if you are going to try to apply this A to A to what you're working on right now, this is self-reported data. There's no independent verification. And of course, all of these numbers are relative. So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. It's incredibly difficult to get small business influencer campaign data because they often don't publish the granular CTR. So especially in niche verticals like developer tools, education, partnerships are often bespoke and under NDA. So again, public data is really scarce because they can't release that. Again, thinking about intellectual property and things like that. That's the ReTreat. They're all like tree houses, essentially. It's really kind of cool. OLIPOP is our second one with impact.com, creator and affiliate program. That was the end of last year, beginning of this year. OLIPOP is an interesting case study because it shows how blending affiliate incentives, which are really usually very easy to track, with influencer partnerships can directly connect to content and to revenue. This was a multi-month hybrid program across Instagram, TikTok, and various blogs. The focus was on building relationships, not one-off posts, rewarding creators for consistent promotion and performance. There was a unique aspect to it too, because there were a few creators working on this, so originality became kind of part of that as well. They want to make sure that they're doing the very best content and being as original as possible. Commission tiers incentivized creators to continue posting while affiliate links provided clean attribution data. So the results, the creator channel drove roughly 12% of all sales. The campaign achieved an impressive 982% return on ad spend, or ROAS. OLIPOP built an ambassador network over time. So they took the people that they gathered and created brand advocates instead of just these temporary promoters. Again, creating community in a way to kind of give a feedback loop to the company as well. So again, this was self-reported, and it was reported by a platform that does have an incentive, so not audited. This was from impact.com. But it is an interesting case study and kind of a mid-tier consumer product. It really just shows how giving creators real incentive, making them feel like they have skin in the game, transforms them from content vendors into revenue partners, which, is so much more than you're ever going to get from a mega influencer like a celebrity. They're just never going to feel that invested unless they've had a personal investment in it or something, which just makes it much more complicated. So it improved both performance and retention because it was like a real partnership. And I think you could tell in the content as well. And then the last one I want to look at is ASICS and TikTok Creative Exchange. These were creator-made ads. In 2024, ASICS demonstrated how creator-produced ads can outperform brand-produced creative, even with identical media budgets. So in a way, the idea was to kind of say, okay, if we hired an agency to do this, this is what it would cost. If I gave that budget to influencers, what would they be able to do? And that is such a great insight, whether this is independently audited data or not, because one of the hardest decisions to make is when to stop, continuing to feed a model of ads that may not be working well for you anymore. And I think a lot of people are at that place with Google ads. Google's trying to reinvent itself and figure out how in the world are we going to optimize in this ever-changing world. But I also work with companies that are, or even companies I'm not working with. I get one-off asks all the time about, how do we know when the time is right to turn off the hose to what we're spending on Google ads? I'm a big fan of diversification, taking a little budget and testing it. So I think that's really important. And that's kind of what ASICS did here. So I really like the campaign for that reason, probably. Through TikTok's Creative Exchange, ASICS briefed creators to make short-form performance ad variants optimized for native TikTok behavior. The campaign ran for several weeks and included A/B testing to compare creator content against studio content. So the results were that creator-produced ads delivered 136% higher return on ad spend, ROAS. Conversion rates increased by 41%. That's an incredible number. Cost per acquisition, or CPA, decreased 62% compared to non-creator ads. And all of this was achieved with the same media spend that they would have given to an agency. Proving content quality, not budget, was the differentiator. Of course, this is self-published by TikTok. It was not independently audited. So keep that in mind if you're looking to use these numbers one-to-one. But the relative lift, not even the ROI, is really impressive here because, of course, influencer marketing is long tail. As I said, I compare it to word of mouth. It's still somebody recommending something to you at the end of the day, and it's left online for a very long time. And we'll get to that in a bit. But this case really proves that creators' native understanding of a platform and its culture can significantly outperform traditional brand creative. And it's a major reason why brands increasingly treat creators as part of the performance team, not just brand storytellers. So the key takeaways here is across all three cases, influencer content clearly drove business outcomes, but the type of impact kind of differed by strategy. So for ReTreat, long tail organic growth through consistency and storytelling, OLIPOP, direct revenue attribution through affiliate and incentive structures, and ASICS enhanced paid performance through creator-produced content rather than produced for them by an agency. Because of full ROI transparency being a relatively rare thing, being upfront about what's reported versus what isn't makes these insights in a way more trustworthy and positions you as someone who understands both the potential and limitations of ROI today. So you being in an organization and knowing what exactly you should or shouldn't be able to track, but what might still have value over time is really important, particularly if you're looking at strategies within categories. I always say, don't reinvent the wheel. Go and see what the wheel can teach you. Setting up for success and why ROI is hard to track, and we will get to how to track it. But first, want you to understand kind of the struggle, because this is a really key feature that brings folks to my influencer marketing course. And one of the reasons it was highly rated for upskilling, one is that attribution it is messy and nonlinear in most of marketing. And influencer marketing impacts awareness, it impacts credibility, and it impacts intent before purchase stages that can happen long before the final click. Just think about it in the real world, right? If someone in your family, let's say, that you have a specific strong feeling about, say your mother or a parental figure, if they recommend something to you, you may strongly want to do that or strongly not do that. And it's sort of like the influencer that's chosen, right? That influencer is a really important, in a way, person in the scheme of things across the buyer journey. So traditional attribution models that are the last click give full credit to the final step, like a paid ad or email, and ignore all the prior influences. And that means influencer campaigns can be undervalued because they don't directly close the sale, even though they make the sale possible. On a side note, I like to look at how gender works within this. And as this is Latina Geeks, I think it's important to say, or just underline, because we're looking at biases in all of these parts of new technologies. Sometimes because most influencers are women, it can become part of the industry that we don't sort of speak up for ourselves or point out the value that we can bring. So that, I think, actually makes it a little murkier, because there may be a reluctance to say, hey, I drove a lot of word of mouth to you, or, that intangible piece of brand credibility and authenticity, whatever it is that particular community is really responding to. So customer journeys can involve multiple touch points. I mean, let's face it, who of us hasn't gone on some online site to buy something and then started thinking about outside influences, right? And then got off track or interrupted by your kid or whomever, and you need to go back online later. I do a lot of healthcare marketing. So you can imagine different audiences stop and research different things. One thing I tell people all the time, even if one generation is doing it and the other isn't, check personality fit with your doctor. If you're going to an expensive specialist, don't go to somebody that you are probably going to have a personality conflict with, because you're going to be spending time and a lot of money and it's just going to annoy you. So buyers often interact on average with 6 to 12 different touch points. And a touch point would be every time you're going online. So whether your computer, your phone, your tablet, to purchase, to do that end thing that the company wants you to do, convert. Influencer content may be one or more of those steps, but it's rarely the last step. And because those touch points overlap, influencer post, organic search, retargeting ad, email reminder, isolating the exact contribution of influencer content can become difficult and imprecise. Another piece of this is that data is fragmented and siloed. Social platforms control engagement metrics and views, likes, saves, while revenue lives in e-commerce platforms, CRMs, customer relationship management systems, and in ad dashboards that often don't have integrations or don't have integrations that work as you would hope, not as straightforwardly as you would hope. These systems often don't talk to each other, or the ones that do are so expensive it maybe doesn't make sense to do that. With AI, there's a lot of things you can do now on your own to get things talking to each other, but you got to get the data. And with few brands investing in data integration tools, they're not connecting. So without a unified view, linking content exposure to revenue can feel impossible, but I think you can. We'll get to that in the best practices, but I think you can paint a picture for execs that helps them without just sort of giving them screenshots. And then influencer content has long tail, which I've been talking about. The value of influencer content doesn't stop when the campaign ends. Content continues to circulate, get shared, rank in search, and influence decisions weeks or months later. Most brands stop measuring ROI after the campaign window, and they miss that second wave, third wave, fourth wave of impact. Bookings, for example, continued climbing months after the influencer stays ended. That's important to think about. And also just think about the nature of search and how much it's changing. We talk about artificial intelligence optimization, natural speech recognition, those sorts of tools like Alexa and Siri, all of those, and how they recommend to us and speak to us. All of those things are in flux right now because they're all kind of competing with each other in new ways. I saw some really interesting things happen last week, actually. It was an event that none of us could miss in terms of Charlie Kirk and what happened there. And all of a sudden, I work with a doctor that works in addiction and recovery. Anything she did around forgiveness suddenly had huge spikes in traffic Sunday, Monday, just completely unrelated. But the themes that society and culture and might be driven on a particular platform, if you have content there, may just go viral years after you've stopped creating it. So it's really important to be using the fundamental best practices to be tracking content. And these couple of industry reports, White Communications 2024 report and the Influencer Marketing Hub's 2024 benchmark, which are very recognized reports. And they're both saying that there are challenges in terms of ROI. In the White Communications report, 49% of brands say measuring ROI is their number one influencer marketing challenge. And I actually think that those of us that are creative, think laterally, connect the dots, we can figure this out, especially those of us that love and really appreciate harnessing community. We kind of understand it better than some folks that are not as social. Influencer Marketing Hub said that the average reported ROI is $7.78 per $1 spent, but that seems very low in my experience. Methodologies can vary, but most brands can't fully verify their results. If nearly half the industry struggles with ROI tracking, it's not a failure. It's a signal that measurement infrastructure hasn't caught up to influencer marketing's reality. We just don't have quite the best-in-class tools. So there's some best practices that I'm going to suggest to fill the gap. This reminds me of before we had the legal measures in place to make it easier to figure out what an influencer ad even was, if something was sponsored or not. It took the law some time to catch up, and we'll get to the legal component in a minute. But I think the attribution models, they're all in flux right now, and I've seen some modeling that's really interesting to help with that. But that's the takeaway I want to leave you with. So set yourself up for success. It's really important. You want to have layered KPIs, key performance indicators, not just the revenue. And you want to define both primary metrics, which could be sales, conversions, customer acquisition cost, lifetime value or customer lifetime value, and secondary metrics, engagement, reach, click-through rate, branded search volume, earned media volume. It could even be like placement on particular blogs or getting opportunities to continue adding content somewhere that's important for your community. Secondary KPIs act as early indicators of success and can help you show value before the revenue data comes in. So I think that's one thing you want to make sure that you always have in place. And that really applies to most campaigns. But I think the biggest thing that I notice when I start a new course with influencer marketing is most students come in with a goal or an objective of raising awareness. They all do capstone projects, and I encourage them to choose something that they can do in real life so that at the end of it, they have a portfolio item, ideally, that they can upload to LinkedIn and people can see how they can actually do a campaign. You can even do it for a company that you want to work for to garner their attention. So as you're putting this together, you need to get more specific than awareness. So many people start with just awareness, especially if you don't have a marketing background. And I will tell you, if you have a marketing or PR background, you can bankrupt yourself if you're just going for awareness. Awareness doesn't convert. Somebody, who's past their childbearing years, and I do fertility marketing, that's not helping anyone. And it may be offending them at the end of the day. So you really need to, be targeting and doing it in a way that, is appropriate and trauma-informed, depending on what it is, what industries you're touching. Layered KPIs and look for those early indicators of success, but also plan for continuity, not just the sponsored posts. That's just not the best practice. One post is rarely enough to build trust and move someone through a buying journey, especially if you're talking 6 to 12 times picking up and putting down devices, questions that come up, research that they might do, other thoughts that might pop up in your head of something you were thinking of that somebody told you a year ago or more. You want to instrument campaigns before the launch. Be a leader within your campaign. Don't let the influencer lead this. Make sure you've got the basics, the UTM parameters to links. Give it to them. I actually was troubleshooting with a friend Just doing a Google Ads campaign and getting influencers to use the links they've been given, really important. So don't give them a link if it doesn't have a UTM code in it, basically, and let them know they may not get compensated. I think all of these are important things to kind of add, and the experience that I have that I like to share that can really help you make sure you're getting the most out of your relationship. Assign custom promo codes down to each creator and specific to each campaign you do with them. You really can look at which quarter they had impact or which month. And you want to install pixels from day one. That's the best way to track analytics anyway, because you're going to capture a lot of demographic information about where people are coming from and going to if you have that installed. I always like to remind people UTM is Urchin Tracking Module, and it was named after the original analytics company Google acquired in 2005. UTM parameters are just small snippets you add to the end of a URL to track where traffic is coming from and how users interact with the content. So in case you didn't know what a UTM was, you've learned a little something. You also want to measure relative lift when hard ROI isn't possible. If you can't tie revenue directly to content, you want to compare performance against your benchmarks. So you need to get those benchmarks beforehand. So creator ads versus brand ads. You saw ASICS is a perfect example of that. They had 136% return on ad spend, so they could compare that to what they had spent prior. You want to compare influencer traffic versus baseline site traffic, and also make sure you're mapping seasonality, seasonal events. Now, for consumer packaged goods companies, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, now Prime Week, everybody's got their own thing. Walmart has its thing, and all of them have something. If you're not tracking in comparison to those things, it's going to be problematic. But I can say in fertility healthcare, you also have seasonality. The holidays, often people hunker down, they're sharing with family members. It can be a really emotional time. And it may be difficult to want to spend your time off from work undergoing fertility treatment. Or if you're looking at preservation, it may be a time you're asking your family members. You can take them aside one-on-one and say like, hey, would you do XYZ? Would you spend? Would you go into debt? How would you look at these different ways of creating family these days that can be really huge decisions? So I think you want to be thinking about, again, like beginning of year, it's almost like new year, new you, focusing on the body. Again, fertility industry, you should have a 15 to 30% lift, hopefully more than that, in the number of inquiries that you can convert. And you know that if that's your industry. So make sure you're accounting for those things in those benchmarks and you're looking at them. I think Steve in a video on LinkedIn for UCSD Extended Studies uses the example of IHOP Pancake Day. There's going to be a lot of traffic around that. And if you're a different pancake maker, you need to be aware that that is happening so that you kind of take that into account too. So it works multiple ways on multiple levels. The community fit that I've been talking about, prioritizing creator and audience alignment over follower count. A ton of followers, using the fertility example of people that are over the age of 50, is probably not going to help you if you're looking to help people that want to do IVF. Of course, you don't want to be ageist, but you also don't want to offend. So you have to have a delicate balance there. You certainly wouldn't be using your ad spend on egg freezing, for example. And you would want to make sure you're not maybe doing egg freezing with specific communities like gay men. That's maybe not something that they're going to be thinking about, depending on their situation, how they decide to create their family. It's usually simpler than the fertility example. I like to go to that because it can be really difficult, and I like to problem solve those things. But you want to go with niche creators with strong trust in a particular community, a particular vertical that you are trying to get conversions from, and can drive more conversions than macro influencers with broad trust but less invested followings, which is why the nano and the micro are so powerful. It's the engagement piece, engagement. We always say it. It's really important, not the numbers necessarily. And then you want to track beyond the campaign window. Extend your reporting window to capture long tail conversions. 30, 60, 90-day attribution is the standard to provide a more accurate picture of influencer impact. I always say do at least a year and go further than that if you can. If you're doing pixel tracking, it's a little easier because you can sometimes find things from unique campaigns that you might have done. This is particularly critical for high consideration products or seasonal services where purchase decisions can take longer, but may have a limited time in particular. I always like to use the example of when I worked with someone who was like a coming up influencer doctor back in the day, who had a huge blog that we grew, an incredible amount of traffic for. he was starting to get interest from TV networks. And so, having had a background in traditional TV news back in the day, I knew I could kind of negotiate. I was in the position to be able to say, hey, I want to make sure the closed captions actually have the website addresses. Because, obviously for accessibility, it's important, but it often goes overlooked that those transcripts can end up other places on the web. Well, years after I had moved on from marketing for that person, but stayed friendly, his team got in touch. He got a ton of conversions for the specific procedure that he created. No one else really does, but there's high competition for similar in the space because all of these transcripts started going out around the time podcasts rose. So because it was, in this case, it was a Good Morning America segment, ended up on YouTube. And then once podcasts were added to YouTube Music, all of that phenomena happened. And so the transcripts ended up all these places online, and they started getting awareness, traffic, and they got a lot of revenue out of it. So I always like that example, early influencer time, but it was a really good learning experience. ROI is inherently invisible in a way, but the fact is it's just really measured poorly in most campaigns. The solution is to design for measurement from day one. You set the groundwork, set layered KPIs, implement tracking infrastructure, and enforce it. Benchmark relative performance and extend your measurement window. These practices turn influencer ROI from something fuzzy into something you can track, report, and improve over time, even if the industry as a whole still struggles with that transparency. So track beyond the campaign window. Let's go deeper. It's not just where influence happens, of course. It's how it gets discovered on each platform, which always feels like a mystery to us. So this is something that I revisit often to keep my students updated. A good reason to create the course was to force me to have to keep up with all of the ways that algorithms change, right? Each platform has its own algorithmic logic. They determine who sees what and when. Understanding this makes your influencer strategy smarter, faster, and more affordable. But don't depend just on your influencer to lead you. You need to know some of these things as you're making the choice of influencer. It helps you get better data from the influencer to make sure you're really understanding if your investment is paying off. The first I like to look at is TikTok. Their algorithm is all about discovery first, new. It's not based on who you follow. It's driven by behavior. So their keys are watch time, replays, shares, and saves. And the idea on TikTok is that any content can go viral from any account, even if it has 0 followers. They want interest first, not necessarily network first. So bringing a whole bunch of people from Instagram to TikTok isn't necessarily going to work for you right away if you're the influencer. But what you need to know is that nano creators can break through fast if the content hooks early. They may not have as much experience doing influencer marketing, and that might be an important piece to consider in terms of they may be driving the right kind of behavior, but are they going to create the right kind of content? Are they maybe mature enough or have the industry insight or even community insight to be as sensitive to the materials that you may need them to cover? These are important things to think about because they're communicating in real time. On Instagram, you have mixed signals. You have a straddling of old and new. So follower graph, which is kind of the old way of doing things, and discovery engine. So finding new things. And they're testing things all the time. They're doing the new trial right now, which I've been playing with recently. Reels, they're the key to growth because they trigger strong engagement signals. They're looking for like, saving, sharing, commenting, and replays on Reels that tell the algorithm to boost your reach. Stories get higher reach for known creators, so creators that have been on the platform for a while and have some level of following that's been, if not growing, at least consistent. So people buying large followings, that's not really going to work. It really doesn't work anywhere. And then, of course, there's shopping behavior that boosts branded content that's relatively new to the platform. So what you need to know here is consistent engagement to stay visible and influencer credibility matter a lot. If you're in a high trust field, say medicine, like the law, if you are working with an influencer that may have one kind of presence on Instagram, but also has an OnlyFans account, it may be a no-go for the kind of brand that you're building, just based on the brand name OnlyFans. So you don't want to have those surprises. You really want to understand their ecosystem. Now, how does YouTube work? YouTube is a combination of search, Google owned, and a combination of other factors. But they're more traditional search factors, I think. Discovery comes from title, tags. Still, tags are important. People forget. I cannot believe how many people have come to me and I look at all of their content that they've had maybe over years on YouTube and they've never added tags. Seems insane to me. Watch history and topic clusters. Those are all really important. Evergreen is a potential if the content ranks for long tail keywords. I used the example of forgiveness, and YouTube was one of the places where we saw search traffic on Sunday, Monday. And what you need to understand here is influencers with well-structured educational content can create really long-term traffic. LinkedIn is important. They have authority weighted engagements. What they consider authority, they're prioritizing credibility and early post engagement. When you break that down, they're looking for comments, reposts, and early likes. I'd say within the first hour even, not even 24 hours, I think the early likes are going to be really fast, which is why you may get tagged more even on LinkedIn than it may be kind of even spam tagged. It's just getting a lot faster. Profiles with domain relevance get boosted. So if the brand and the person have alignment on the network, they have the kinds of jobs that relate to the category in which your business runs, that obviously is going to connect more easily and give you more visibility. And of course, personal stories with professional value are the ones that are really resonating there. So influencer credibility, job title, experience, post quality drive reach more than follower count. And so those of us that have been doing something for a long time can maybe feel like, hey, that's something I can really be valued for. You can potentially harness that. Last but definitely not least, Reddit. Community is the algorithm. No one is famous on Reddit unless they're maybe doing an AMA, but the community rules. They say whether someone is famous or not. You've got your upvotes, downvotes, thread contribution, and transparency that are really important to the community there, of course. Platforms like small business, femtech, side hustle are very active, but self-promotion is policed, as I think it should be. If you're a longtime Redditor like me, trust is earned, not given, and it can be taken away. That's the important part to think about. So working with Reddit native creators is high trust, high impact, but it's gotta be authentic. They've gotta know their stuff. Each platform has its own rules of visibility. Influencers who understand and work with the algorithm, not against it, drive better results, but even better results come from companies and individuals within companies who understand these principles and keep up with the changes. They don't have to be experts, but enough that they're working with the right people as they go through creator selection or reevaluate, which should happen at least every 3 months. So now that you know where influencers thrive and how discovery works, let's talk about what kind of content actually performs. Here's what the data and platforms tell us, especially in tech and entrepreneurship. One, short form video is the standard, whether it's TikTok, Reels, Shorts, or even now on LinkedIn. Content under 60 seconds consistently gets more reach. Attention spans are short. Algorithms reward completion rates, finishing watching something. Short videos equal lower production barrier also, so there's just more of it. It's got to be short form, and short form equals under 60 seconds. Next, the hook is everything. The hook happens literally within the first 3 seconds. 3 seconds determines whether someone scrolls or stays. The kinds of hooks people will use, I'm sure you've heard, stop scrolling if you're building your own app. This is how I got 1,000 users without ads. Mistake I made as a Latina founder in tech. Those are some hooks that can work for you. I always love the example, and I'll probably post this video soon because I just think it's so amusing. But Stephen Bartlett on Dragon's Den in the UK, our version of Shark Tank. When he was on, a younger business guru talked with this company about stopping the scroll. And it was a company in a business related to bathroom. And he was just basically saying, get an influencer, put a brown on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be the real thing, just brown. And if people think that, they will stop and go, what is that person doing? If you find the right combination of brown, you know what I mean, and influencer, right? Maybe somebody, she in Orange County and, looks perfect all the time. So it can sometimes that pairing of content and how creative and how far they'll go is what the fun part is. It's the hook that gets people to stop the scroll. And remember, the scroll is something that social networks have trained our brains. So we're literally addicted to it. And addiction is a whole other thing that I talk about in my digital marketing class. But it's really important to think, actually, people have to stop their actual intrinsic behavior, what seems natural to them. If you're cold, you put a sweater on, those types of things where it just feels natural to do it. It feels natural to keep scrolling for most people. So really get those hooks in there and really think about hooks that tie into people emotionally. Really important. Influencers with tech cred often lead with curiosity, pain points, or unexpected truths. So tip for you with tech cred out there. Next is a basic storytelling, storytelling, storytelling. It just beats that perfect post anymore. People know those aren't authentic. The background's always beautiful. We've seen, and I feel like it's been going on for the last couple of years, but just a massive shift away from that overly polished content. There are exceptions to this, like when I do marketing, if I'm working with specific medical practices or law or other high trust fields in Orange County, they expect you to look a certain way and actually will comment or DM you and maybe make negative remarks about your hair. It's incredible. So outside those outliers, storytelling, the quickness, getting things out there, being real, being authentic, that's the most important thing, not the polished content. In fact, there can be skepticism because of avatars and AI and things looking so perfect. People really want personal voice, behind the scenes, and process over perfection. They want to learn from you, but they also want to see the authentic you. And I think this is true really in underrepresented communities a lot, where authenticity can build trust faster than filters ever will. There's kind of a shorthand within groups, and I think that's really important to lean into and recognize. Next, format matters, and the formats that people tend to like the most in influencer, or that we know perform well at least, is content that falls into 4 different formats: teaching, showing, reacting, and reviewing. So teach, quick explainer, how-to or tip breakdown; show, behind the scenes, workflow before and after; react, duet, stitch, or response to a trend or article; and review, a product, tool, app, or platform feedback. And you can see how each of those could play into a particular attribution model or content type that could work for certain industries better than others. These formats work well for creators who straddle tech, product, and personal brands especially. And then finally, using platform native tools. And this is expanding right now, so it's important to think about each app rewards creators who use their editing tools. And this is happening more and more. So you've got a couple new apps out there: TikTok's newish Studio app and Instagram's Edits app. LinkedIn's carousel posts or native video are the next kind of combination. But really, they're having you download another app so they can track and learn from your behavior. And you see this especially on Meta platforms, and it didn't surprise me that TikTok Studio came out before Instagram had its edits. But in any event, it's really important to use those platform native tools. And this can sometimes be difficult because you might be asking an influencer to the old way of doing it might be to give you the content to distribute it using a publishing tool. But increasingly, we just need to go to the network to publish it. It's just how it works. There's too much incentive to stay on the platforms of those companies. So it's worth the extra time. And if it's something that a creator is on all the time anyway, it's going to be very quick for them. But the bottom line is, don't ever edit in Descript or spend a bunch of time in CapCut making everything look important. Edit where your app is so they work for you. And winning influencer content doesn't look professional. It looks intentional, useful, and human. It's really important. Let's go to data and metrics. Whether it's $100 or $25,000, if you're spending on influencer marketing, you need to know what you're getting back. If you're spending $1, you deserve to know what you're getting back, right? So the one thing you need to remember is, first, not all metrics matter equally. The truth is that sales do not equal likes, or likes don't equal sales, vice versa. Followers do not equal reach, and views do not equal engagement. You need to be strategic. You need to be thinking about this as a risk exercise, like everything in business. How risk averse can you be based on your budget and other factors and time? If you're a startup and you need to reach certain milestones in order to get the next stage of investment, the reality is you need to be very strategic and not just be going for the biggest number. You need to look at the people that align with your target market the best. And then the second thing there is metrics that actually matter, your KPIs. Look at your engagement rate likes, comments, shares. The equation for each of these that I go over is engagement rate is likes plus comments plus shares divided by total followers. That's our equation and how we get an engagement rate. Of course, there are tools online endlessly to help you understand this, but I do always like to go over the math, like actually count things. Your click-through rate, or CTR, is clicks divided by views. Conversion rate is signups, downloads, purchases divided by clicks. And your CPA, cost per acquisition, or CAC, which is your customer acquisition cost, is your total spend divided by conversions. So these are going to baseline tell you, is your spend actually turning into action and how quickly? Because the other thing is how quickly you want to be able to assess, are these quality leads that are coming in? Are they actually converting? So you need to look at all stages of your funnel as well. The next thing is to match the metric to the goal. Different goals need different KPIs. So I talked about awareness earlier. If you're looking for just awareness, focus on views and engagement rate. Of course, awareness is only going to be useful if they engage. That's letting you know that they're probably part of your target audience. If you want sales, which is the reality most of us need, you got to track CTR, click-through rate, CAC, which is the customer acquisition cost, and conversions. And if you're looking for trust, there's different ways we look at this, but you really want to look at kind of qualitative comments. Sentiment is really important, the up, down piece of things, and saves. And of course, some platforms are going to play into that more than others. I mean, Reddit is just brutal, but it's usually the truth. So if I'm trying to get a particular company I'm working with to maybe understand that something is not working well, I might put it out there on Reddit for them to just see the brutal truth. It's interesting too with developers I've known over time that are kind of like mini celebs of their own, where they don't really want to take feedback in, it seems, and they have a huge community and they can be harsh on Reddit, but if they would just listen, you're like, this is useful information. Why don't you listen? Again, it's qualitative comments. Of course, you don't want the people that are just going to be trolls and be contrarian just to be contrarian. But I think sentiment overall and saves are definitely good measures that work everywhere. Tip, always ask creators what metrics they track and never just rely on screenshots. I always ask for access to insights dashboards where they exist, and you can always go old school. I want a spreadsheet because I can take a spreadsheet and that data and I can visualize it any way I want to or need to, because usually I'm reporting to someone or I have a colleague that I'm collaborating with that's working with me on a campaign, and I need to make sure that they feel like they can buy into this, that they want to continue with it and have some sense of what the momentum is. Is this not going anywhere, or is this something that we should continue to pursue and keep an eye on? Or is it just like a raging success? You need to kind of have the numbers to go with that. And if you can't really do that with a screenshot. I mean, it's better now because, AI tools, but they're not perfect. We know OCR is not the end all be all. And of course, it's a technology that's improving all the time. But again, if you just get the raw data in a spreadsheet and you're clear about what that data is, and you from the outset work with the influencer to say, these are my expectations, this is what's in our agreement, makes it very, very simple. Next, attribution is everything. You can't improve what you don't track. So you want to use UTM links, discount codes, custom landing pages, and affiliate platforms. I mentioned Impact before, Refersion is another. Or even better, test creators kind of against each other using it. You can think of it as like A/B tracking. Beware of bias, male versus female. They may have different audiences that respond quicker or not as quick. I think that's an important thing to be thinking about. But the takeaway here is that you want to treat influencer marketing like any performance channel. If it's not measurable, it is not strategic. Staying ethical and FTC compliant. This is important because depending on the case law, you yourself, as someone who's running the campaign, can actually be considered legally liable in some cases. Some case law is more decided than others. Let's get into the legal and ethical side and make sure that you lead on this, that you put it in agreements. Companies need to do that and not leave it to the influencer, if not just to protect you as an individual. So first, disclosure is not optional. It's the law. I think most of us know that. In the US, the FTC requires a clear disclosure when there's a paid relationship between a brand and a creator. So that can include cash, free products, affiliate commissions, event access or perks, and it can take other forms. But it's where there's value exchange. It has to be disclosed. Disclosure can't be ambiguous. You need to be very clear about it. So you can't say things like, thanks to XYZ brand. You can't say partnered with blah, blah, blah. If you were given a financial incentive or given something, you've got to say hashtag ad, hashtag sponsored in partnership with, this video is sponsored by. These are clear. Don't hide disclosures in the comments, and make sure if you're contracting with an influencer that the disclosure appears before the fold. In reviewing examples for my fall course, influencer marketing, the amount of great influencers that I've worked with over time that are just burying, like Code Academy, anybody work for Code Academy, let them know the people they're choosing are just burying their information. You would never know that they're part of it because there's so many monetization channels. And then most platforms have tools. Make sure you use them. The paid partnership tag on Instagram is a great example. YouTube declaring your sponsorships. Of course, TikTok has a disclosure. And then remember that ethics are an important part of building the influence within the community itself. It's not just about staying legal, but it's really about having a transparent relationship with audience and the influencer themselves. It builds audience trust over time. Reputation management is part of this, let's face it. You can end up with reviews that are bad if this doesn't work correctly. You want to keep engagement honest, prevent reputation management issues for you and for the influencer. And remember, trust is your most valuable currency. Do not risk it by cutting corners. And your final takeaway is that influencer marketing without disclosure isn't clever, it's illegal. So be transparent, be ethical, and build trust along the way.